Good evening and welcome very, very much to Conversations, where we have two gentlemen who can discuss the very volatile current situation in terms of Pakistan and that Kashmir area that has been recently seeing troubles once again. It's unfortunate there's been so much trouble there. I'd like to introduce the two guests, get into a conversation, and see if we can't get a historical and a broader perspective on developments in that part of the world. And if I may, on my far left is Jafar Syed, and Jafar Syed is a senior researcher with the Islamic Research Institute, and Jafar, welcome very, very much to the conversation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chana.
And on my immediate left is Iqbal Kahn, and Mr. Kahn is the Consul General for the country of Pakistan here in New York, and Mr. Kahn, welcome very, very much to the conversation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chana. Thank you for inviting us.
I wonder if you might, we're here May 22, 1990, and the disturbing headlines in the New York Times and papers around the world is that there's been an explosion, or there's been an explosion of emotional, there was an assassination and so forth in Kashmir. I wonder if maybe you could share with us and the television audience the historical development of that area as it relates to the Pakistani involvement in that particular situation.
I would be very happy to do so, Dr. Chana. It is most unfortunate that such an important political leader in Kashmir, Maulvi Muhammad Farooq, has been assassinated. He was that a moderate politician who for the last 25 years had been trying to urge the Indian government that it should respect its moral and political obligation and international obligation to the people of Kashmir, that they should have the right of self-determination. Unfortunately, this sort of an event has taken place where Maulvi Muhammad Farooq has been assassinated, and in the wake of its assassination in just one day, and this is only according to the official estimates, 30 people have died, and which really brings the death toll since the beginning of this year to over 400, with hundreds of others having been men, women and children, and unarmed men, women and children having been injured and other casualties. I think it would be useful if one could give the historical background of the Kashmir dispute. What happened was that in 1947, India and Pakistan came into being on the principle that the contiguous Muslim majority areas in India and the contiguous non-Muslim majority areas should be separated, and the former should form what later on came to be known as Pakistan, and the latter India. There was no problem on that principle, and India and Pakistan came into being on the basis of that principle. However, at the same time, you had nearly 562 princely states in India. These princely states were under the paramountcy of the British government of the time. The British government did not have administrative control of these princely states. They, however, looked after the external defense, the internal security, and the foreign relations of these princely states. Once the British government, at the time of independence of India and Pakistan and the creation of the two dominions, left the region, then the paramountcy did not go to the successor states, did not fall on India and Pakistan. It in fact lapsed.
How many of those?
There were 562.
And where are they located?
And they were located all over British India. And the advice which was given by the Viceroy at that time was Lord Mountbatten, that this into these princely states was that they should consider joining one of the two dominions. They could either join India or they could join Pakistan. But what they should take into consideration when doing so was, one, the contiguity. If they were geographically contiguous to Pakistan, then they should naturally consider joining Pakistan. In addition to that, the communal structure of the population. If the majority of the population were Muslim and they were contiguous to Pakistan, then the natural thing would be for them to join Pakistan.
That makes geopolitical
and also yes, and also the principle that Muslim majority areas would go to Pakistan and the non-Muslim areas would go to India. However, if even after taking these two things into consideration there were any problems, then the final solution would lie in a reference to the people of that princely state. Now there were no problems with regard to most of the princely states. One joined the other, and some joined Pakistan, some joined India. However, in the case of three princely states, one of them was Kashmir, where you had a Hindu ruler and the majority population was Muslim. Then you had Hyderabad in the south of India, where you had a Muslim ruler, but the majority of the population was Hindu.
What happened in that case?
I'll just come to it.
Or
then you have another princely state called Junagadh, where again the ruler was a Muslim and the majority of the population was Hindu.
And where was that located?
This was on the west coast of India,
All right.
contiguous to India.
All right.
The ruler of Junagadh said, I will accede to Pakistan. India said, no, this contravenes the principle that the contiguous area with a majority non-Muslim population should go to India. The Indian troops marched into Junagadh and annexed it, even though the ruler had said that I would like to accede to Pakistan. In the case of Hyderabad, the ruler said, I would like to remain independent. But the Indian said, nothing doing. It's a majority non-Muslim population, and it sent its troops in. And at that time, if I recall correctly, the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Jafar Nehru, said that, well, the Nizam was called the ruler. He said that, well, most of the ministers in his cabinet are criminals. And therefore, there's no question of his remaining independent and all. We should, Hyderabad should be a part of India. So the Indian troops went into Hyderabad, annexed it. And at that time, Churchill remarked, this sort of a logic just reminds me of the logic put forward by Hitler when he gobbled up Austria, or for example, of Mussolini. So then came the question of Kashmir. When independence came, the ruler of Kashmir did not decide whether he should go to India or he should go to Pakistan. And here may I just tell you that about a century ago, in about 1846, Kashmir was sold by the British to a Hindu ruler who bought it for a sum of $1.5 million, which would be something the price of about a 3-bedroom apartment in
about
probably
3.5
bedroom apartment in Midtown Manhattan.
Yes, right.
He sold it to the ruler, and for the next 1 century, he and his descendants let loose a reign of terror and oppression, persecution in Kashmir, where what they did was not to improve the lot of the people, but to extract from them as much taxes as they could, both in cash and in kind.
And this was done by a Hindu ruler,
this was
delivered down upon a largely Muslim population.
Largely Muslim population, and he had bought Kashmir from the British. So now at the time of independence in 1947, when the Muslim population realized that the ruler was not doing anything, they rose up in revolt against this tyranny and against this oppression. When this happened and the ruler was not able to control the revolt, it asked India, you sent in troops in order to quell this rebellion. India said, no, we will not send you any troops until you accede to us. The ruler then decided, okay, I will accede to you, you send in troops and quell the rebellion. The ruler acceded to India.
This was in 47?
In 1947,
right.
The ruler acceded to India. But India was obviously very uncomfortable with the accession, because here there was the case of Junagadh, where the ruler had acceded to Pakistan and it said nothing doing. The majority population is Hindu, it must, and it's contiguous, it must come here to us. Now it could not say that logic does not apply to Kashmir. So when accepting the accession, India, the Governor General of India said, who at that time was Lord Mountbatten, that this accession is temporary. Ultimately, the destiny of Kashmir will be decided in accordance with the wishes of the people of Kashmir.
And that would require some sort of
self-determination or plebiscite, which was, as I mentioned earlier, the advice given by the Viceroy to the Indian princely states, that you have to take these things into consideration, and if there is a dispute, then the final arbiter of your fate would be this thing. So, and also at the same time, the Prime Minister of India wrote to Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah that this is a temporary measure. The accession is a temporary. Finally, it has to be decided by the will of the people of Kashmir. India sent in its troops. There was a lot of fighting in Kashmir, and ultimately India itself referred the dispute to the United Nations. And the United Nations decided that this is a disputed territory. And the solution to this disputed territory lies in a free and fair and impartial plebiscite under the auspices of the United Nations, which will entitle the people of Kashmir to decide whether they want to join Pakistan or they want to join India.
Maybe we could
yes, please.
Talk here. If they were to do this, you're following this, if there were such a fair and impartial election, the people of Kashmir would vote to join Pakistan in the sense that they are overwhelmingly Muslim.
As Brother Khan elaborated, that it was the tyranny of the Hindu rulers even before 1 century, that the nationalhood or the Muslim community overall orientation, that was still the same as it was before it was sold. As you said, in 1947, even though in violation of 4th Geneva Convention, demography has been changed. Even though if there is a free and fair election, or if they are given a chance, Kashmiri, a chance to have to determine their own destiny, it is more inconsistent with Wilson 14 point, self-determination is the right of every community. Even now 85% of the population will join Pakistan. So Pakistan has no problem, Kashmiris have no problem if they get international community support, if they get the observance of the UN resolution itself. The decision is clear. I have a paper here I showed you before in a meeting. From 1954 until 1978, 6,400 state-sponsored massacres, they have been staged by the Indians, by the Hindus against the Muslims.
In that particular part of the, or in the whole area?
In general.
Yeah.
I have a 6-word news. 90,000 Sikhs, they have been massacred again by the overwhelming majority of Hindus from June 5th, 1984 until now.
This is just a festering sore that has been there right from the beginning.
Now, what happens on international level? This line which is dividing Kashmiris, one nation from each another, that reminds us of the Cold War stage. Korea was divided, Germany was divided, Palestine was divided, Vietnam was divided. Now the time has come that America should take the moral lead. I have this constitution in 1790, Bill of Rights granted American people 10 basic rights. Those rights are not in existence in Bharat since 1947. There is no due process of law. There is no freedom of speech for the minorities. So there is only one solution to Kashmir problem, that these people should be given This nation should be given, as brother pointed out elaborately, under the partition plan, which was agreed upon by all the participant parties in 1947. These minorities should be given the right to determine their future. If it would have been determined 1947, these miseries would have not occurred. That has been denied 40 years. Now, my appeal to America in particular and to Soviet Union in particular is that at this moment there is a consensus between two superpowers. In Cold War, I should say, war stage, Soviet Union and Bharat or India, they were allies. We were allies of America. Now, they should have a consensus. They should not ally with anybody. They should ally with the justice. And justice says that Kashmiris and the Sikh, 20 million Sikh, they should be given the right of self-determination. Kashmiris in millions, they should be given the right of determination. And 200 million Muslim minorities living there who have been massacred on this stage, at this level, they should be given the human rights which are guaranteed by the United Nations Charter all over the world to the minorities.
It might be well to be able to bring these into broad general questions of international law and so forth. And I wonder if you could maybe bring it back to how, if on the face of this indictment, as it were, which seems on the surface of it so obviously and patently obvious that this would be an indictment of basic international law per se, what would be the response of those responsible for the Indian government, do you think, to the arguments that they just heard now? Perhaps you could address that.
Well, I wouldn't like to speak on behalf of the Indians, but I can say what the Indians have repeatedly been saying. They have said that it is nothing to do with the Kashmiris, the uprising in Kashmir. It is Pakistan which is aiding and abetting them, and as a result of Pakistan's interference, the Kashmiris are coming out on the streets. The Kashmiris are demanding the right of self-determination. Now, we have denied this completely. We regard this allegation of interference by Pakistan as totally baseless. We don't only rest here. We don't say that, okay, you say that we are interfering, we say we are not interfering, and that's it. We say, okay, let's bring in a neutral mechanism. Let there be a third party. Let the UN set up a body in Kashmir and monitor the activities which are going on in Kashmir, and then report whether the allegations of Pakistan's interference in Kashmir are correct or not.
Trying to bring it to the UN.
Bring it to the UN. If the Indians are not interested in the UN, let the OIC, which the Organization of Islamic Conference, let them do it. If the Indians are not interested in the OIC, let there be any other neutral mechanism. The most important thing is that if the Indians sincerely believe in this thing, that Pakistan is interfering, then they should agree to some sort of a mechanism which can put at rest these charges. Either Pakistan is believed or the Indians are believed. Unfortunately, not only has India not agreed to having a UN presence there or an OIC presence there or even a neutral mechanism, India has expelled all foreign journalists from Indian-held Kashmir.
They've imposed a blackout.
Absolutely. The state assemblies have been dismissed. The Chief Minister of Kashmir has been dismissed. A governor has been appointed, and 200,000 security forces have been inducted into Kashmir to quell this demand which the Indians consider as a law and order situation. And as I mentioned earlier, there have been gross violations of human rights. Even a body like the Amnesty International has sent messages to the Indian government and given instances where unarmed people have been shot. They have been shot with bullets. They've been shot in the body. They have been shot in the head. They've been shot in the back. And Amnesty International has brought this to the attention of the Indian government. It is not only that Pakistan which is saying that. There is an Indian human rights body called a Committee for the Initiative on Kashmir. It is a body based in India, comprising of Indians, which went into Kashmir, stayed there for about a week in March, and they interviewed senior government officials, eyewitnesses, victims, other concerned people, and came to the conclusion that in Kashmir there had been widespread persecution, unprovoked firing on peaceful demonstrators, illegal arrests, unlawful entry, long hours of curfew, with the result the civilian life was completely disrupted, and even conditions of starvation prevailed in Kashmir.
It's a sad.
These are very serious charges, not levied by Pakistan, levied by an Indian organization, a human rights body. There have been other human rights bodies which have gone to Pakistan.
There are so many problems confronting that area. There are other considerations in terms of the implications of development in India and in Pakistan. The area is an absolutely crucial area of the coming together of many differing world views. Geopolitically, it's extremely important. This particular issue is one that's been festering since the beginning of the division of the subcontinent. It's one that much of the world is going to have to give attention to as a particularly hot spot, as it were. We're going to have to try and understand that. And we do thank you very, very much for coming up, for setting the tone of this. We want to look at this issue in much greater detail here on this particular program and in some subsequent programs. It's an incredibly interesting and important subject, and I'm just sorry we don't have here on this particular segment more time to go into it, but I certainly do thank both of you for coming in and setting the groundwork, setting the historical context for this. We want to do more programming on this subject. I wish we had more time here that we could discuss it, and we will be going into it in greater detail on this program and in subsequent programs. I thank you both very, very much for coming in and sharing this with us.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Channon, and giving us an opportunity to express our views on this.
It's a pleasure, and I would then, in the cable audience, remind you that on my immediate left is Iqbal Kahn, who is, again, Consul General of the country of Pakistan here in New York, and on my far left is Jafar Syed, who is a senior research fellow with the Islamic Research Institute here in New York. Happy to have been able to bring you those perceptions. We invite you to stay tuned. There'll be more coming up in the same general topic area momentarily. That's it for this particular segment, I'm afraid. Gentlemen, once again, thank you very, very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Please stay tuned. Please stay tuned. We're coming right back. Back to Conversations, where we're pleased and honored to be able to welcome to the program the current ambassador of Pakistan to the United States, that being Mr. Zulfiqar Khan, and we're very happy to welcome him to Conversations, and if I may say so, to welcome him to New York City as well. It's a great pleasure. I wonder if you might, I asked you before we began the program, and this interview had been preceded by one where we were discussing Kashmir, which has been in the news recently. The conflict between Kashmir and India, the conflict between India and Pakistan that has emerged, that's been a central point of dissent between the two countries right from the beginning of the establishment of the two countries in the modern year, 1947. Kashmir has been a particularly strong sticking point or a focus of the difficulty that exists between those countries. Would that be more or less fair to say that the major sticking point, as it were, in terms of harmonious relations between those two countries would be the issue of Kashmir?
Yes, indeed. If I may term it as Kashmir as a festering sore that has festered for all these years, bedeviling the relations between Pakistan and India, I think perhaps you know the history, how this conflict arose in the first place. When India and Pakistan gained their independence in 1947, there were something like 500 princely states in India, and or rather in the British India. And at the time that these two countries became independent, it was decided that the rulers of these 500 Indian states will have to opt either for Pakistan or India. I think here it needs certain explanation. The third choice, which has often been talked about, the independence, was not given to them because it would have led to balkanization of both the states.
It certainly would have, yeah.
So all but 3 states opted either for India or Pakistan. These 3 states were Hyderabad, Deccan, and Junagadh, and the third one was Kashmir. It so happened that in the 2 states, in Hyderabad, Deccan and Junagadh, the rulers were Muslims, but majority of the population were Hindus. And despite the fact that Junagadh ruler had acceded to Pakistan, the Indian took what they termed as police action. They sent in their army both in Hyderabad, Deccan and in Junagadh, and they usurped these states into then India. The third state, which was contiguous with Pakistan, where the 74% of the people were Muslims, but the ruler happened to be Hindu. The ruler first did not accede either to Pakistan or to India, but later on, at the urging of Indian Prime Minister, it did accede to India, but with the condition that the people of Kashmir will be allowed to determine their own destiny, whether they want to join India or Pakistan.
In a free plebiscite.
In a free plebiscite. And this plebiscite this resolution is there in the United Nations Security Council. It's one of the resolutions. And both India and Pakistan are signatory to it, and it was agreed that there would be a plebiscite. Now the Indian Prime Minister continued to say it until 1952 that there would be plebiscite, and the people of the state of Kashmir would be allowed to decide their future in that plebiscite. But after 1952, the Indians reneged on their promise, and since then the first war was fought in 1948, the second war was fought in 1965, and once again, as you know, there's a lot of tension on our borders. The recent eruption that has taken place inside Kashmir, it's not for the first time that such an eruption has taken place, but this time it has been very long and very sustained. As you know, that nearly 400 people have been killed, and several thousands wounded. As far as the state of Kashmir is concerned, it is the people are being kept down with the presence of several Indian Army divisions which have been employed, and there's virtually have been throughout with few hours of lifting now and then for last several months now.
Yeah, a press blackout is beginning.
Yes, they threw out all the press, both the foreign and their own, from the state, but I think recently they have allowed some to come back.
That in 1948, and when the formative events were taking place as far as Kashmir is concerned, was taking place in that context a volatile change which accompanied the birth of an independent India and Pakistan. There was a great displacement, there were a number of refugees, there was a great loss of life. It was a tremendously volatile and traumatic time that the people of the subcontinent were suffering. The birth of these two countries, it was very heroic, and it was very much heralded and welcomed by one and all in terms of the throwing off of a colonial power, but it was a very, very difficult time.
Indeed, there were a lot of massacre took place, the exchange of population took place. But I'm afraid one of the major dispute over state of Jammu and Kashmir has not come anywhere near solution despite all these years. And the major reason is that Indians have not honored the solemn promise that they made at the time in 1947 that the people of Jammu and Kashmir will be arbiter of their own destiny.
It might be good for us to reiterate that the bulk of the population of Kashmir is Muslim.
74%.
74%. The idea of there being a plebiscite to decide the fate of Kashmir is enshrined within the United Nations documents.
Indeed.
And the United Nations documents and Security Council has recognized the primacy of these agreements between the two countries.
Indeed.
Would India claim that elections that have been held would have in fact constituted what they would have called the plebiscite as spelled out by the United Nations? There have been elections attempted or held in that area that would have the claim be made by India that elections have in fact been held and that the area has voted, or the people have voted to be part of India? Or what would be the Indian response to that? Well, it may not be fair for me to ask you, but...
Yes. Well, let me say this, that as far as the Indians are concerned, this is what they claim, that since the elections have been held, therefore the people of Jammu and Kashmir have been allowed to exercise their will.
When was that election held that they would refer to?
They were off and on. The elections have been held 3-4 times. I do not recall now the exact number of times.
Yeah.
The last they were held. I'll come to that a little later. But the fact is that the elections are no substitute for plebiscite. Plebiscite was for a different reason altogether. Plebiscite was to decide whether they wish to join India or Pakistan.
And that never has been held.
That right has never been given to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, so far as these elections are concerned, let me say that in the last election that were held, hardly 4% people of Jammu and Kashmir took part.
They just boycotted?
There was total boycott. They totally rejected because they do not want elections. Only mean that they can elect some people from, and they remain part of India, which they don't want to remain. And they have.
I see.
So the elections held are no substitute for plebiscite.
So what we want, what you would want, and what the reading of the United Nations documentation would be, is to address that major premise rather than minor premises that don't accept that idea.
It's not only Pakistan, but it is also India who's a party to that. They are also signatory, and so is the entire international community. And Indian claim that simply too much time has elapsed, and therefore it has become redundant. I think if this principle were to be followed, then the whole international commitments will become a mockery.
Yes, that's, well, it could be seen that way, of course, it could be seen that way. If it is not, if the plebiscite has not been held, and if you have a boycott of these elections on the order of, you say, 2 to 4% only of the people, there must be among, and forgive me, I haven't visited there must be among the people there tremendous discontent with the occupation of that part of the country where they, as Muslims, feel, if that's the right term. Do they feel as an occupied people, or what would be the attitude of the Muslim Kashmiris that you could perhaps convey to us a feeling for that?
Well, you can see that there's been a total alienation of the people of Jammu and Kashmir from India, and you know that people of Srinagar have come out not in tens of thousands but hundreds of thousands to protest against this unarmed people facing the Indian army on the streets. It's not an easy thing for people to do. It means that they have a very, very deep feeling and passion for their freedom and for their right to exercise their will.
And they feel as an occupied people? Is that fair to say? They feel like an occupied people.
Because if you look at the state of Jammu and Kashmir today, the Indian army is nothing but an army of occupation. And they have behaved like one too.
They have behaved that way? Violations of human rights?
Indeed.
This can be documented
at a very mass scale. In this connection, I'd like to tell you that recently there was an Indian Human Rights Commission which was headed by a former judge of the Bombay High Court, and they have compiled a report which lists places, incidents, and the persons and the kind of atrocities that were committed by the Indian armed forces on the people of Jammu and Kashmir.
These are, if I may, atrocities committed with the knowledge of and part of the policy of the Indian government, or were these renegade individuals, or what would be the situation?
Well, it is difficult for me to say, but
Yes.
the responsibility, final responsibility, is that of Government of India.
Yes, of course.
When people are being killed at such mass scale, when the houses are being pillaged, and where the people are being kept in under detention without any warrant, without any law, so how can government disclaim their responsibility?
I was going to ask you, what has been the response of the Indian government to this? I mean, what is their official
Well, instead of recognizing that the entire what is happening in Jammu and Kashmir is indigenous, instead they've been trying to blame Pakistan. And well, there is a long litany of accusations against us, but some of the major accusations are that it is Pakistan which is fomenting the trouble inside. It is Pakistan which is aiding and abetting the terrorism inside Jammu and Kashmir, and it is Pakistan which has set up centers for training the saboteurs. Now, our response to all this has been, first and foremost, how does Pakistan train hundreds of thousands of people barehanded to come out in the streets?
It sounds a little like the Intifada in the occupied territory of
Indeed,
the West Bank.
there is certain resemblance to that. The second...
But you said hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of... You know, in one of the demonstrations, 400,000 people in Srinagar came out on the streets, and 400,000 people in Srinagar mean nearly half the population of that city.
Now, has there been clash, if I may, excuse me, has there been clash on a quasi-military scale with weapons and so forth, or has it been more of a just a civilian population against the
totally unarmed people who
totally unarmed? There hasn't been
unarmed people who have been shot at. The second point regarding aiding and abetting terrorism is concerned, the policy of the government of Pakistan is very, very clear. We do not condone, let alone abet, in any act of terrorism anywhere in the world. You must realize that Pakistan itself has been victim of act of this terrorism for nearly 10 long years. When the Soviet army was inside Afghanistan, there were acts of terrorism being committed in all our major cities, and thousands of people died and many more were injured as a result of it. We know what act of terrorism is, and there is no question of government of Pakistan ever aiding and abetting terrorism anywhere.
I'm sorry, I hadn't realized you'd suffered such terroristic attacks.
Indeed.
By whom was...
well, this was by the communist regime in Afghanistan. They wanted to dissuade Pakistan.
And there have been many refugees from Afghanistan which had come into Pakistan.
Yes, we still have 3.8 million refugees, Afghan refugees sitting inside Pakistan. So we are fully conscious, and our government under no circumstances will ever aid or abet terrorism anywhere. The third charge is that we have centers of these training for these saboteurs. Now we have, our government is on record. We have offered that first and foremost there should be a summit meeting between the two prime ministers. Our prime minister is ready to meet the Indian prime minister at any place, at any time.
Her father and Indira Gandhi had met on that issue.
That was
issued in the early 70s, right? Yeah.
After 71 war. The second, after which the similar agreement came into being.
Yes.
The second offer that government of Pakistan has made is that we are prepared to accept a third-party mediation. And the fourth one we have said, all right, fine. We accuse each other of many things. Why not have a neutral mechanism which can surveil and which can investigate all these cases and allegations? We're still waiting for a reply.
This could be taken to, it has been taken to, and could be taken up within the Security Council and in the United Nations, or?
No, we have not yet taken up this matter to the United Nations or to the Security Council, although our Foreign Minister has written a letter to the President of the Security Council drawing his attention to the happenings inside Kashmir.
But it has not seen fit for that to be...
Well, we reserve the right
Yes.
whenever we wish to, but so far we have not.
There have been, of course, the Security Council resolutions on the Kashmir question, right from 1948 and others, and
51, 52.
51, 52, and by and large they have held the proposition that that plebiscite, the promise of a plebiscite,
Indeed.
has not been held, and the international community has recognized that fact and stands, I presume, in favor of the proposition that that plebiscite, or that
Absolutely.
people should be able to choose for themselves.
Perhaps it will be interesting for you to know that when this plebiscite was decided upon, and at that time a very distinguished advocate was to supervise, Admiral Chester Nimitz
Yes.
was to supervise this
Okay.
plebiscite. But I'm afraid that this thing did not happen, with the result that still continue to bitter and better relations between the two countries.
It's a very, as you said earlier, characterized as a festering sore, as it is between the two countries. The claims on the part of the Indian government that there is Pakistani instigation of the uprising, as it were. The uprising comes to mind, and one thinks of the West Bank and in Palestine. But the instigation of Palestine would be flowing from the fact that Palestine is adjacent to the area. They have had a long-term interest in it, and that there is an allegiance at the level of Muslim identification between Pakistan and the Muslim peoples of Kashmir, I presume.
Well, you see,
Would the people, in your estimation, if I may have a follow-up, if there were a plebiscite held, a freely held and plebiscite, what would be the attitude of the people of Kashmir? Would they wish to join with Pakistan, and that would be what they would express? Are there any separatist movements, Muslim-based separatist movements, among the people of Kashmir that see their own identity as the inheritor of this princely state in their own?
Well, as I said, that in accordance with the United Nations Security Council resolution, the people of Kashmir were given a choice either to join India or Pakistan. Now, it's not, Pakistan is a signatory to this. It's not for Pakistan to amend or change that resolution. It is true that there are some people who have raised this voice of having a third choice of independence. But let me tell you this thing, that as far as sometimes there are very few people, but since they are more strident, they are heard more because they are something totally different.
I see, yeah.
And I am quite confident that let there be a plebiscite and let the people of Kashmir decide whether India and Pakistan, and the results will be very, very obvious to you.
I wonder if we might return to something you said earlier, and that being that Kashmir has never been seen as an integral part of India by people in Pakistan and so forth, whereas other parts of India are. It's a distinct nature that the Kashmiri people have. It hasn't been seen in Pakistani eyes and in much of the world as an integral part of India the way other parts of the India is concerned. Huh?
No, certainly India never was and never will be the integral part of India, and unless the people of Jammu and Kashmir decides in a plebiscite that is the right which is enshrined in the Security Council resolution. Till 52, the Indian Prime Minister kept on saying that there will be a plebiscite. It was later that the Indians reneged on the solemn pledges that they said that now Kashmir is an integral part of India. They changed the constitution. You know, more recently, and they say so much time has elapsed, and therefore simply the passage of time does not confer that kind of right on the Indians to integrate Kashmir into Indian Union.
They've been attempting to do that, I would presume, educationally, culturally, economically, and so forth. They've been attempting to integrate that, but apparently to very little success.
Of course,
when you have only a 4% turnout for an election. That's pretty
right.
indicative.
And the kind of eruptions that we have seen every now and then.
Yeah.
This is not the first time that the people of Kashmir have raised their voices.
Mm-hmm.
There have been many such incidents, but this time it was on a much bigger scale. It has been much more sustained.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right. And recently, of course, it was. The plebiscite, the idea of the plebiscite is a central on India, again, just to reiterate, that idea of there being a plebiscite that could be guaranteed, the legitimacy of it and so forth, by other outside forces or other powers or some, a plebiscite to let those people decide. India rejects that proposition?
Indeed.
That's the sticking point.
That is the sticking point.
Has there been any give recently as far as India is concerned toward, let's say, perhaps international community outcry or against the human rights violations and so forth? Has there been any give on their part as far as you can see? You're in a sensitive position?
Yes. So far the Indians have held on to their earlier claim that since India, this state of Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part, and if they were to do it, it will lead to balkanization of India. But let me tell you that Kashmir always had a distinct and a separate position than any other state of India. As you can see that even right now, they have a separate minister for the state of Kashmir. They don't have separate ministers for other states.
I didn't realize that. Yeah.
And it was, they made an amendment to their constitution in total violation of their solemn commitment to the international community. And in that they said that Kashmir has become a part of India, which is totally incorrect. Now, more recently, you have seen in the Nordic states, which were taken over by the Soviet Union in 1941, and you can see that those states now are demanding independence.
Well, they're demanding their independence from the Soviet Union. Yes,
Indeed.
in fact, this process of ethnic identity is just blossoming like mushrooms all around the world. I mean, there's so many different people that are sitting there. One wonders how many quote-unquote nations, or how the basis of the nation-state is to be drawn. The problems of confederation and federation are still there, confronting all sections. Pakistan itself is divided, Baluchi and Sindh and different spots. It's always a matter of bringing diverse peoples together into a political union. It's a difficult one that all the world
The question
faces.
of Kashmir is not so much ethnic. The question of Kashmir, you see the whole division of India and Pakistan was on the basis of Muslim majority and Hindu majority areas.
Yes, right.
The Hindu Muslim majority area what became Pakistan.
Yes.
So here the principle was totally different, but it was accepted and it was not implemented.
It's the sort of thing the Soviet Union is likely to find in South Central Asia. They're going to run into a great deal of
it's very
Azerbaijan
difficult.
and other places where the Muslim sense of differentiating themselves out from
It is very, very difficult to predict as to what is going to happen.
Yes.
But coming back to the state of Jammu and Kashmir,
Yes.
these people, the fact is that they've been denied their right.
The right to have this, which has been recognized as their right by the international
Indeed.
community. Again, back to the analogy of the occupied territories of Palestine that keeps coming up. The demonstrations and the activity on the part of Kashmiri people, unarmed people, have been spontaneous on the part of the Kashmiri people, as far as you are concerned, and represents the long-suffering situation that they've endured, as it were, under occupation. And in that sense, it would be similar to the view that is seen by many as far as the West Bank of Palestine is concerned.
Well, it's very
with
difficult.
Israel.
Yes, it's
I mean, the analogy is perhaps overdrawn.
It's very difficult to
So
draw
young people with
parallels.
stones and that sort of thing.
But the fact is that there also, like you said in case of West Bank, the unarmed people are coming out and they're facing armed security forces. But the analogy is correct to that extent in case of Kashmir. Here too, You know, when unarmed people come out in the street, they can never be instigated from outside. They have to feel this thing within. It has to have the internal dynamics which makes them do these kind of things.
Sure, yeah.
Because it's not an easy thing, and you cannot train people for that.
And the troops remain. How many, do we have an idea of how many troops they do have there and what the dimensions of that occupying force, if they may object to that term, but what you would call the occupying force in Kashmir is, and what the dimensions of the conflict is in terms of arms?
There are nearly 200,000 troops in that area today, which is by any standards a very, very large force.
Indeed. And they are trained soldiers. The situation that they come up against is civilians, unarmed civilians. It isn't exactly a military engagement that they're involved with. It's crowd control or something of that sort. It's a different proposition than a military arrangement. Is there any dissension among the people who make up that occupying force? What is the attitude of the human rights community in India, or perhaps dissenting voices within India? And what are the pressures of the international community and upon the Indian government, or the people of India itself, who might be able to see the possibility of there being a relenting on the part of India in the name of a long-term peace and stability of Kashmir?
Well, so far,
from your perception,
yes, so far as the human rights violations are concerned, as I mentioned to you, there's an Indian Human Rights Commission, which has recently published a very damning report on the atrocities and the acts of repression committed by the Indian security forces on the people of Jammu and Kashmir. So far as the dissenting voices, I'm afraid I'm not aware of them, but amongst the Indian intellectuals, amongst the Indian, one of the former Foreign Minister, Sardar Saran Singh, and there are certain other groups who have raised voices against a possible conflict.
One goes back again, we have it so much, and excuse me for this, we have so much of it in the American press, and it is indicative of the fact that we are so, comparatively so, we are so ill-informed as far as the dimensions of the conflict in Kashmir as relates, as compared to, let's say, the situation in occupied Palestine or that area. We have this, much of this in our press, often the occupying force of Israel and the occupied territories. But on Israel, they're split. The government of Israel is split in terms of the relationship of the people, what they feel toward that. The pressure of the United States, which is very, very large as far as Israel is concerned, is beginning to perhaps change and shift a little bit in terms of that. We now talk to the PLO. I think what I was getting at was the context, the international context of, or domestic in the case of Israel. An analogy is one that the forces that would be leading the Indian government toward a more, what from your perspective would be a reasonable attitude, and one that might lead to them sitting down to talk or to try and find some resolution to this. So if you understand by the analogy.
So far as the question of Palestine is concerned, you must know that the attention has been focused on that region for a fairly long time.
Particularly here in the United States.
In the United States, but even here, compared to that, the present eruption in Kashmir is of recent origin.
Yes.
And it is beginning to catch attention. And it was as a result of this and a concern shown by the government of the United States that Gates mission went both to Pakistan and India, counseling restraint on both the countries. I do not know, but I do believe that a similar message has also been sent by Soviet Union. So I'm sure over a period of time, when the international community, they begin to take note of it, and more pressure is put, I'm sure there's some kind of solution can emerge from this situation. First and foremost, of course, the effort is to avoid a conflict between India and Pakistan, because that is going to not solve the problem. The problem of Kashmir will still remain.
Yeah, it's too bad these emotional...
The war is not going to solve this problem.
No.
Because until and unless the real problem and that is the right of self-determination by the people of Jammu and Kashmir, is conceded, this problem is going to continue to fester.
In the world, one certainly would hope that this could be avoided. A conflagration would be a horror. It is, I wonder, the military alignment. India is very much of a superpower. I mean, as far as military capability, population, it's a nuclear power.
Indeed.
What is the, and you've had some contact with and military
Yes.
contact and so forth, what is the geopolitical reality of the military forces between the country of India and Pakistan? India is very much more of a military power. I wonder if you could maybe just address that.
Well, India, as far as military power is concerned, it's not only a big military power, it happens to be the fourth largest military power in the world. And when you consider who are the first three, then it becomes even more impressive. The first three being, of course, the United States, Soviet Union, and China.
How are the relationships between India and Pakistan likely to change as far as their relationships to the larger superpowers and so forth?
Well, it's true that the relationship between India and Pakistan has been very friendly, and the recent military invasion of Afghanistan by Soviet Union further embittered the relation between Pakistan and Soviet Union. But now that the Soviet Union have withdrawn their troops and the great changes that have come about as a result of liberalization inside the United Soviet Union, democratization of Eastern Europe, and the various other changes that we are seeing, we want to have a friendly relation with Soviet Union, because Soviet Union is a country which is physically separated from Pakistan by 18 miles thin corridor of Wakhan.
Well, okay, it's an extremely important country. As we said earlier, it's a monotheistic country from the west, as it were, geostrategically highly importantly placed as an area we ought to understand far better. And I would like to think and hope that this our interview here with you, I'm certainly sure your contribution to this interview has helped the viewing public understand this area much more. And I want to thank you really very much for this.
Thank you very much.
Too brief interview, but I want to thank you very much for that. And I would remind you in the television audience, it has been your pleasure, the perceptions of His Excellency Zulfiqar Khan, the ambassador to the United States from the country of Pakistan. We're very happy to be able to present his views to you and invite you to tune in again next week. We'll be coming back again next week. That's it for this particular segment. Ambassador Khan, once again, thank you very much indeed. Good night. We'll see you next week.
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the United Nations 40 years ago, may not be a legally binding document. It is rather a promise made by all the members of the United Nations to the people of the world. We at Amnesty International believe that the governments who have adopted the Declaration have a moral responsibility to keep that promise.
Write Amnesty International, Post Office Box 37137, Washington, D.C. 20013.